Is the negotiations collapsing? A dramatic report. The United States had renewed maritime activity in the Strait of Hormuz. The American Navy is once again escorting vessels through the most sensitive passage in the world. Is Operation Freedom returning? And the big question, has the blockade been lifted, or has a new and more dangerous phase actually begun? The United States Navy has launched a dramatic move in the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran continues to signal that it is the one holding the cards. The American Navy is renewing assistance to vessels that have been struck in the strait. A Greek oil tanker, which had been stuck since March, received American assistance in the crossings. Military officials in the United States say that they will help release about 10 more vessels. And at the same time, Iran is accusing the United States of violating a ceasefire. The negotiations are continuing after moving to Doha, Qatar, but Tehran is already warning that it will not leave any harm unanswered following the American strikes in the Hormuzgan province. Mujtaba Khamenei's advisor said that the real guarantee for an agreement with the United States is the Strait of Hormuz. And on the northern front, escalation in Lebanon is taking place. The IDF struck more than 100 Hezbollah targets. And in Gaza, the IDF is hitting hard at the command structure of the Hamas terrorist organization. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are here on Boots on the Ground, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today, May 27th, we're going into all the details. And look, despite the many reports, there is still no full clarity regarding the content of the emerging Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran. A memorandum that is supposed to lead to the end of the war and the opening of talks on a new agreement, in which there will be a more serious reference to the nuclear issue. But even without knowing every clause and every little letter in the document, it's already possible to analyze the positions of the two sides. It is possible to identify where there is signs of compromise, where there is an attempt to buy time, and where the biggest question lies from Israel's point of view. Can Jerusalem still influence the process, or has the train already left the station? We will go into all the details very soon with our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani. The United States Navy is renewing assistance to vessels struck in the Strait of Hormuz. A Greek oil tanker, which had been stuck since March, received assistance in crossing. American military officials stated that they will help release about 10 additional vessels. And at the same time, the United States deployed F-22 fighter jets and dozens of refueling aircrafts at military facilities and also airports in Israel. Israeli media outlets described the move as an unprecedented American military presence. And this is not a technical detail, because aerial refueling aircrafts are a critical asset for long-range strikes. They allow the fighter jets to stay in the air longer, extend their operational range, and carry out missions deep inside the enemy territory. In previous American operations against Iran, KC-135 and KC-46 refueling aircraft supported long-range munitions by the American and also by the Israeli aircraft from several points in the Middle East. Analysts estimate that this move may point to the possibility that the United States is preparing to renew strikes against Iran, or at least wants the Iranians to understand that this option is on the table. And the Iranian Foreign Ministry accused the United States last night of violating the fragile ceasefire during the past 48 hours in Hormuzgan. This is a province in southern Iran. In an official statement, Tehran made clear that it will not leave any evil unanswered and will not hesitate to defend the Iranian nation. These accusations come after United States Central Command, CENTCOM, announced that its forces struck missile facilities and speedboats on Monday that were trying to plant mines in the Persian Gulf. And at the same time, the Revolutionary Guards claimed that They fired at American aircrafts that tried to enter Iran's airspace. Wait, I will explain what happened here in depth. As we reported to you yesterday, the Strait of Hormuz heated up quickly. In the United States, they moved from warnings to direct military action. According to the American military, its forces identified unusual Revolutionary Guards activities in the area. This is speedboats, drones, and movements that looked like an attempt to place naval mines in one of the most sensitive routes in the world. In simple words, Iran tried to turn Hormuz into a trap, and at the same time, Iran launched suicide drones towards the American vessels. These vessels are operating in the Strait of Hormuz as part of the blockade and the maritime enforcement. So the Americans intercepted the threats. But during those same hours, unusual movement was also identified at the Iranian missile sites near the strait, raising concerns that Iran was preparing to strike the American aircrafts as well. This is including aircrafts operating from American aircraft carriers. In Washington, the strikes that followed were described as defensive actions. But in practice, this is an escalation. The United States raised heavy firepower into the air and struck the Iranian targets that were defined as an immediate threat to the American forces and to freedom of navigation. According to US Central Command, since the beginning of the naval blockade on Iran, this is in the Strait of Hormuz, 27 ships have already been ordered to turn back. The meaning is that a maritime route to reach roughly 1/5 of the world's oil and gas supply passes has almost completely stopped. And at the same time, Trump is warning that if Iran rejects the conditions of the United States, Washington will strike key infrastructure inside Iran. And on the other side, Tehran is threatening to strike vital infrastructures in the Gulf states. The Pentagon has already prepared the list of additional targets in case President Trump decides to strike Iran. American officials say that the remaining targets are much more complex to attack, which makes them harder to locate and to hit. And this connects us to the negotiations. Iran is coming to the talks with the United States with two clear goals: to receive economic breathing room without truly giving up the heart of the nuclear program. Tehran is demanding renewed access to about $100 billion in frozen assets, a return to the global oil markets, and a relief that would allow the regime to breathe. At the same time, the Revolutionary Guards continue to oppose dismantling the nuclear program, and that's exactly the heart of the crisis. In simple words, Iran wants money, time, and legitimacy, but without paying a real price. I tend to believe that Trump is not a sucker. He understands very well what the Iranians are trying to do. Give him the image of victory without giving him a real victory in this situation. And after the interception of the American drone, Trump already sent a sharp message when he published a video of a powerful strike in Tehran to his Truth social media network. In other words, even while the talks continue, the military threat is still on the table. Look, Trump is not necessarily giving up on the victory. Instead of a complete military decision, he is looking for a broad regional package, opening the Strait of Hormuz, stabilizing the economy, stopping the regional escalation, and maybe also giving a renewed push to the Abraham Accords. But the more impressive the regional package becomes, the greater the temptation to skip over the truly difficult clauses. And in addition, US President Donald Trump tried to connect a possible deal with Iran to a broader regional move: the joining of the Arab and the Muslim countries, such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar, to the Abraham Accords with Israel, with us. And on the Gaza front, Israel is expanding the Hamas terrorist organization and explaining to them who is in control of this situation. Here in Israel, we confirmed that senior Hamas official Muhammad Odeh was eliminated in a strike in the Gaza Strip. Odeh was appointed head of the military wing in place of Izzadin al-Haddad, was also eliminated in an IDF strike less than 2 weeks ago. Odeh, who was the head of Hamas's military intelligence on October 7th, was eliminated last night in an IDF airstrike in the El Rimal neighborhood of Gaza City. The question now is simple. Is Hamas even managing to rebuild a chain of command in Gaza? Or does everyone who receives a new position already understands that he's entering Israel's elimination list and might not stay around for longer? And in Lebanon, is Hezbollah now preparing for a takeover from within? Hezbollah is threatening to cause the collapse of the Lebanese government while it continues to deal with Israel. The organization is signaling that, from its point of view, it is ready to risk internal collapse in Lebanon before agreeing to give up its weapons. Tonight, the IDF struck more than 100 terror infrastructures and terrorists belonging to the Hezbollah terrorist organization, and at the same time, following the increase in attacks by fiber optic drones with high immunity against the electrical warfare, losses and injuries are being recorded amongst the IDF soldiers. This is in southern Lebanon. Today, we will also bring you several possible directions for dealing with this threat, from optical and acoustic detection using systems deployed in the field to advanced solutions such as microwave weapons. Yeah, definitely. And in England, the wave of anti-Semitism is intensifying. After a series of shocking anti-Semitic events in recent months, it has now been reported that a massive fire broke out at a kosher supermarket in London, and about 100 firefighters are working to take control of the fire at the Jewish supermarket in the Golders Green neighborhood. At this stage, there are no casualties, and the police are investigating the circumstances of the incident, and we will continue to closely follow what becomes clear in the investigation. And in Spain, the ring is tightening around the Prime Minister. While he leads a sharp anti-Israel line on the international stage, the Prime Minister of Spain finds himself under an unprecedented legal and political siege, which is also connected to the war against Iran. Raids on his party headquarters and complaints about assistance to Iran expose the deep cracks and the corruption in his rule. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and also what's happening in the war against the Revolutionary Guards and in the Middle East. And a second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth. Yes, share this content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. Most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get the full picture, behind the scenes, what it's like to live in Israel in this war. Our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani. So Mati, if CENTCOM denies the United States has officially renewed Project Freedom, but on the ground we are seeing strikes, interceptions, and stuck ships, who's actually controlling the pace of escalation right now in the Strait of Hormuz?
I think that is a great question. One of the big questions right now, one of the big riddles right now, is what's actually happening and going to happen with the Strait of Hormuz. Because to remind everyone, we're in this bizarre in-between situation where the US and Iran are fighting a war of attrition, financial attrition, military attrition, even diplomatic attrition on a certain level. And when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians are taking, well, what you would assume. They're taking the terroristic, let's call it grind type of attack. What do? They scare ships from coming through the straits. They pressure them not to come. They make everyone in the world know that they shouldn't come, and if they want to come, they should coordinate with Iran. But confronting them and working against the Iranian agenda are the American forces that are located in the place. And when they are there, when the American forces are there, they do everything in their power, and that is a substantial amount of military operations, to prevent the Iranians from disrupting the maritime trade in that area. Between the lines, we're hearing rumors. I was just talking to Tomer, our director, behind the scenes about this, and he's saying that there are rumors and there are reports that state that the American armed forces are telling ships that want escort that they can have an escort. But here's what's happened in recent days. There's a couple main events that have taken place. First of all, on several different events, the American forces identified Iranian attempts to lay mines once more inside the Strait of Hormuz. How do they find out? I'm not sure what the exact technological solution was, but they saw some of these mosquito boats, the small speedboats that the Iranians use, and they identified that some of them must have had naval mines on them. And then the American forces came to intercept them and drown those ships. But that's not enough, because once they started doing that, the Iranians tried to prevent them from attacking the ships and start opening fire from land-based rocket launchers or missile launchers towards those ships. So surface to sea missiles against the American ships. And then the rest is history. They retaliate, the others retaliate, and so on and so forth. Next thing you know, we're several days of these skirmishes against each other. But the bottom line really is the same. The bottom line that is in the Strait of Hormuz is taking place a war of maritime attrition. American forces are grinding away at the attempts of the Iranians to disrupt trade. The Iranians, on their turn, are doing the same thing. They're trying to prevent trade from going through the Strait of Hormuz. The finances behind this are significant. The Iranians want to make sure that the Gulf states are cut off and can't make money from moving goods through the Strait of Hormuz. And the American blockade is trying to do that exact same thing to the Iranians. And we need to say they have been doing so successfully, because to a certain degree, some of the Gulf states are able to move their oil across the Arabian Peninsula, going west, east to west, and ending up in the Red Sea. So they're able to export some of their oil. But for Iran, they're losing somewhere between $400 to $500 million per day just from the sale of oil. And because of that, we know that they are bleeding financially. They're under pressure. They're running out of cash reserves, and they want something substantial to take place in the straits that will be at the expense of American interest. What does this mean for the future? Well, there still is a ceasefire. It's just a really weak ceasefire, because behind the scenes, the war of financial attrition continues at full earnest against Iran, and the Iranians are doing their maximum efforts without launching ballistic missiles. That's the big difference, to cause financial damage to the Gulf states and to anyone else in the region. And anything in that range between this and that is fair game. You can attack small ships, you can launch missiles at ships, but not at land targets. And as long as you do that, the ceasefire holds. Why is that? That really connects to the big story here, which is that there is no substantial negotiation taking place, because the gaps between the sides are so dramatic, so substantial, that all we have right now, until that situation changes, is just more and more of this low intensity warfare. It serves the IRGC that wants a weak, it serves the IRGC that wants to make sure that others are suffering because they themselves are weak. And it serves the United States because the more time goes by, the more the Iranians are losing cash and suffering politically. And in the midst of all of that, there are a whole bunch of ships stuck in the Strait of Hormuz, and every couple of days you're going to see a flare-up of a rocket flying, of a missile flying, of a exchange of fire between surface vessels, American destroyers and Iranian Mosquito ships, whatever. You know, it's more of the same kind of thing. This doesn't change the big picture. All it is a symptom of the lack of progress when it comes to an agreement, and the commitment of the Iranians to continue disrupting until they're prevented from doing that. Now, let's just remember one last thought as I wrap up this idea, which is that the Iranians don't seem to have the ability to actually make substantial decisions. What they're able to do right now, because they have a split and ununited leadership, because there doesn't seem to be a clear and all-powerful leader in Iran, even though we've heard from Mujtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader, that he is calling the shots and he rejects the American plan. In reality, all we hear from the Iranians, be it IRGC, Ayatollahs, or other factions, is just rejection of anything the Americans present, and of course, always threats of violence. But what are they willing to do? We haven't heard any of that in a while. That shows you weakness, not strength. If an entity can only say, we refuse to negotiate, but aren't able to tell you what they can do, that shows you they don't have the mechanism to make a united or a conclusive decision as a nation. And that in itself is a huge prevention of actually reaching a proper agreement between the United States and Iran. And until that is resolved, we'll keep seeing more of this and more of this, small conflicts, fighting through proxies, bold statements, on the media, until something dramatic changes. That is the reality we have. We'll just have to get used to living with it.
And Mati, after Israel eliminated Mohammed Odeh, only days after he was appointed head of Hamas's military wing, is Hamas even managing to rebuild a chain of command in Gaza?
When the IDF eliminated Muhammad Uda, it did so only a week after we eliminated his successor. Can you remember his name? I can, because we reported on it multiple times. His name was Azadin al-Haddad. But Azadin al-Haddad was the head of the military wing of Hamas. And Uda was his replacement, who was eliminated last night. So what's actually going on in the Gaza Strip? It's a relatively simple question. Hamas is still in power in the areas that it controls in the Gaza Strip. And the IDF is in control of all the areas in control by the IDF. Hamas is doing everything they can to once again build up their military power. And the IDF is doing everything it can without once again maneuvering through the Gaza Strip and fighting directly with Hamas to eliminate infrastructure and to remove the leadership of the Hamas terrorist organization. What does that look like on the ground? Just the other day, the IDF blew up a network of tunnels in northern Gaza in the Bet Hanun area. The system was, if I remember correctly, spread over 11 kilometers, which is whatever that is in square. Micah, what is that in square miles? Who knows? It's something in square miles. It's something in square miles, less than kilometers. I'm joking. Let's say it's 7 square miles of space. And in that area was an extensive tunnel network by Hamas that the IDF eliminated to prevent them from using it once more. But in reality, every single day of the week, the IDF is fighting against Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip. We're just doing it from more static positions than mobile positions, as was happening in the past. But Hamas is not asleep. Hamas is very much awake and active. They're trying to recruit teenagers and build up their ranks again. They're trying to smuggle weapons. They're trying to harm IDF soldiers. They're trying to regain control over the Gaza Strip. That isn't changing. And the reason for that is very, very simple. The goal in the Gaza Strip was and is to replace Hamas. The only way to have long-term lasting and long-lasting peace or agreement in the Gaza Strip is to have someone else come in and replace Hamas as the governing body, as the leading political entity, as the power at be in the Gaza Strip. And until that happens, Hamas will keep fighting. Israel has no agenda, no interest, no desire to replace Hamas as the governing body of the Gaza Strip. We were there back in the 50s. We don't want to go back once more to that situation. I should say lesson learned, but also that's stated publicly, not a goal of the Israeli government. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to bring in a solution for the Gaza Strip that replaces Hamas. It's an international organization. And these leaders that have been eliminated, it's important that you understand why. Azadin al-Haddad, the previous head of the military arm of Hamas, was a staunch advocate of never allowing anyone to set foot in the Gaza Strip and take over the government or the civil leadership from Hamas. And Uda probably carried exactly the same agenda, and therefore they were eliminated. The IDF is working and will continue working hard to prevent these people from building up once more the terrorism infrastructure in the Gaza Strip that allowed the attacks of October the 7th. I want to say something else. I don't know if we can pull up a map on our screen. Hold on, let me center myself on the screen again. I seem to be drifting leftwards all the time. If you could see a map, you would see the following. The IDF, ever so slightly and slowly, is creeping on territory in the Gaza Strip that was taken over, that belonged to Hamas previously. Why is that? Because Hamas continuously creeps onto IDF positions and tries to build terrorism infrastructure and networks. That's tunnels, that's smuggling routes, that's ways where you can navigate the terrain and get to IDF posts. And the way that the IDF prevents that is every time an attack from Hamas happens, we scoot our positions just a little bit more west. We take over the position that Hamas was holding. We take over the terrain that they were using for lookout, for infiltration routes, and whatever it is. And ever so slowly, we're taking over a little more terrain in the Gaza Strip. This isn't an intentional policy. It's more a result of intentionally going after Hamas infrastructure, which slowly leads to the lines within the Gaza Strip shifting, usually at the favor of the IDF over the Hamas terrorist organization. I want to say something here. Again, every question that we're going to ask about Lebanon, Syria, Iran, or Hamas, There is only one long-term answer. The long-term answer is doing something on a diplomatic, on a government level. There is no way to bomb, well, there's a way to bomb Hamas out. It won't change the government in the Gaza Strip. There's a way to bomb Hezbollah. It won't change the existence of the terrorist organization in Lebanon or the desire of the Iranian regime to keep these organizations, these proxies, alive. So really the only true long-lasting solutions always go through a diplomatic, multinational solution for these regions. And believe me, guys, Gaza needs it. Right now, Israel, which is an enemy of the people of Hamas, the terrorist organization, is the one supplying humanitarian aid and food to the people in Gaza. Why? Well, because we're the ones taking care of the people over there. We're the ones working together with the different aid agencies to try and aid their solution. Not the people on the flotillas trying to get here, by the way. They had no intention of doing anything substantially helpful for the people of Gaza. It was just a PR stunt. But on the ground, Israel is the one providing goods to the people in Gaza. And we need some other kind of government, another type of solution to really change the situation long-term in the Gaza Strip.
And is Lebanon now becoming the arena where Israel is trying to set facts on the ground before the negotiations with Iran will limit us?
I think that's a great question. And the real answer is that there are two answers to this question. On the one hand, the IDF is trying to, well, to make progress and remove as much as Hezbollah as we possibly can before there's a broader regional ceasefire that is long-lasting. That is something that is happening. The IDF wants to weaken Hezbollah as much as possible and is doing so at a higher intensity in recent days. But behind the scenes, there's something else that's happening, which is the fact that Hezbollah itself has upped the tempo of attacks against Israel, but specifically against civilian Israeli targets. These are drones, these are mortars, these are IEDs that they're using in Lebanon, but specifically the drone threat has quickly climbed up in volume and in intensity in recent days. And to retaliate to that, the IDF has no choice but to push harder against Hezbollah positions, against Hezbollah strongholds in the southern part of Lebanon. So there's a diplomatic picture here. There's a long-term question, but the main picture is tactical. The IDF is fighting against Hezbollah as fast and as effectively as possible to try to distance them as much as we can from the Israeli border, to put their drones out of range and out of ability to reach Israeli communities, and importantly, to try and distance them from harming IDF soldiers. Now, yes, there's a big picture at play here where Iran is trying to pull Lebanon into the greater ceasefire that relates to the Strait of Hormuz and everything else related to them. And for Israel, there is, to a certain degree, a ticking clock of when we will no longer be able to carry out full-on military operations in Lebanon, because once a ceasefire hits, we uphold it as much as we possibly can as a country. But for the meantime, we're fighting against Hezbollah, and importantly, we're trying to reduce, eliminate, and distance the threat of what I would call their kinetic attacks, their drones, their missiles, from the population of Israel, and push them further into Lebanon so they cannot hurt our population. I was just in Lebanon the other week, and I saw firsthand the level of Hezbollah infrastructure that was present on the ground throughout the country. And if you have any doubt in your head, go back. It aired this last Saturday on our YouTube channel. Go look up the segment, and you will see how much money Hezbollah invested in terrorism infrastructure inside of Lebanon. And once you see that with your own eyes, it is very, very hard to ignore the fact that Hezbollah must be removed from southern Lebanon. If they want to exist as an organization, they should exist as a legitimate political movement, not as a terrorist organization funded by the Iranians. They are a representation of a foreign evil in this region, money coming from illegal and illicit petrochemical cash for the Iranians that is being used to start terrorism and guerrilla warfare against the people of Israel and to harm people in this country. Let me just end this thought with a picture. Just the other day, a fiber optic drone launched from within Lebanon by Hezbollah hit a bus stop, which is a point where children are dropped off after school, just minutes after dozens of kids were dropped off by their bus in northern Israel. And if that drone had come just minutes earlier, there would have been several dozen hurt Israeli kids in a northern community from a Hezbollah drone. And if that picture is not enough to convince you that Hezbollah needs to be eliminated, weakened, and pushed as far as possibly humanly possible from the border, possibly removed completely from the face of the earth as an existing organization, well, I don't know what will convince you. But for most of us, I think it's very clear that the IDF should continue fighting at full speed against Hezbollah as long as we possibly can.
So thank you very much, Mati. That definitely helped us understand what we are dealing with. To all of you, continue spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible. Click the subscribe button and look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get the full picture of what's happening in Israel. So right now in Israel, in the northern part of the countries, families are still running to bomb shelters. You have elderly Holocaust survivors that need supplies and can't get them. First responders are going to help after drones from Hezbollah explode inside cities. It still happens. Entire communities living under constant threat, with the children studying either from a bomb shelter or remotely. The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is already there to help, on the ground, responding in real time, providing emergency food, water, medicine, and also trauma care. They're equipping the search and rescue teams with protective gear and with critical communication devices that are already helping save more lives. Installing bomb shelters in high-risk communities. I've seen that. They're caring for the Holocaust survivors who have nowhere else to turn to. For more than 40 years now, ICEJ has stood with the people of Israel in their darkest moments. And now the need is urgent once again. So your support today helps deliver immediate aid where it's needed most. Stand with Israel. Make your donation at impactisraeltoday.com. Again, that's impactisraeltoday.com, and help those that need you in the land of Israel through the ICEJ. In the Strait of Hormuz, the United States Navy has returned to escorting civilian ships through one of the most dangerous passages in the world. A giant Greek tanker carrying about 2 million barrels of crude oil received American escort after being stuck in the Gulf since March, and is now making its way east. And at the same time, American forces struck in southern Iran against the Revolutionary Guards boats that were trying to lay naval mines. And the big question is simple. Is this a sign that the blockade of Hormuz is beginning to break? Or is this exactly the moment when Iran is trying to turn the strait into a political weapon? Because what is happening now in Hormuz is not just another isolated naval incident. It is a test of power between the United States and the Revolutionary Guards, while the negotiations between Washington and Tehran, they're still continuing. On one side, the Americans are trying to reopen the shipping lane. On the other side, Iran is trying to show that it can still pressure the global economy at any moment. The American move comes after an especially tense 24 hours. Military analysts identified unusual movement by the Revolutionary Guards near sensitive shipping routes. Fast boats, they tried to approach vulnerable transit areas. Drones were located near American warships, and at the same time, activity was detected at several Iranian surface-to-air missile sites near the strait. This no longer looks like just a statement. It looks like preparation for a real threat against ships and aircrafts operating in the area. The American response was fast, in southern Iran and around Bandar Abbas, and according to the American officials, 2 Revolutionary Guards fast boats were sunk after they tried to lay mines. Additional targets connected to the launch site were also struck, and Washington described it as a self-defense strike, but Tehran is calling it a violation of the ceasefire. And that is exactly the heart of the story. There is a ceasefire, but there's no real quiet. There are negotiations, but on the ground, there are mines, drones, fast boats, missiles, batteries, and commanders waiting to see who blinks first. In recent days, Iran has tried to signal that it is the owner of the strait. It announced a new mechanism for managing ship traffic in Hormuz. According to the Iranian announcement, that authority is supposed to allocate shipping lanes, issue transit permits, and collect payments from commercial vessels. But behind the bureaucratic language, there is a clear military ambition to turn naval presence into permanent control. That is especially dangerous because Hormuz is not just another sea passage, it is a significant share of the world's oil that is going through it. Every delay there quickly reaches energy prices, maritime insurance, markets in Asia, Europe, and also the pockets of civilians and everybody, especially the Persian Gulf and these countries. When ships began shutting off identification systems, sailing carefully, or simply waiting outside the passage, the world understands that the war is no longer staying inside the Middle East. And that's the background for the renewal of Project Freedom. Because the Americans, they already tried in the past to escort ships through the strait, but the move stopped very quickly. And they're returning there with a clear message. Iran will not decide alone who passes, when they pass, and what price do they need to pay to pass. The United States Navy is planning to assist about 10 more vessels in the coming days. This includes giant tankers and container ships. That does not mean that the blockade has been lifted. It means that the Americans have decided to test it by force. But Iran is not only responding, it's also playing a double game. In the negotiations rooms, it speaks about an agreement, about releasing money, and about removing the sanctions. In the waters of Hormuz, the Revolutionary Guards continue testing how far they can go without breaking everything apart. This is a familiar Iranian method, holding a pen in one hand and a mine in the other. So the central clause that continues to block the agreement is the question of the enriched uranium. The Americans want clear supervision, reduced capabilities, and the transfer of sensitive materials outside the regime's control. The Iranians first want money, relief, and recognition that they did not come out defeated. And according to the framework under discussion, Tehran is demanding a significant release of the frozen assets already in the first stage. This is, from Israel's point of view, a very dangerous moment. Money that reaches Tehran does not stay only in Tehran. It can reach Hezbollah, Hamas, the militias in Iraq, and the missiles and the drone systems that are already operating against Israel. So before we continue, this is exactly where we need you with us. If you understand what really is happening in the Middle East, or want to know more, without the slogans, without the bombastic headlines, subscribe to TBN Israel on our YouTube channel and receive daily updates of boots on the ground of what's happening in Hormuz, in Lebanon, in the Gaza Strip, and also in Washington, with effects to how it reaches Israel. While the eyes are turned to Hormuz, in northern Israel, another war continues, and it's becoming less and less quiet. The IDF struck more than 100 Hezbollah targets overnight in the Bekaa Valley and in southern Lebanon. Among the targets were weapons depots, command centers, observation posts, and infrastructures used by the organization to plan attacks against IDF forces and Israeli civilians. In southern Lebanon alone, more than 90 targets were struck, and in the area of Magreshara, several consecutive strikes were carried out within seconds. This is after terrorists were identified inside the organization's infrastructure, and this is according to the information. The strike ended with their elimination. At the same time, the Air Force eliminated Hezbollah terrorists who were moving on motorcycles in an area where IDF forces are operating. This is not an isolated incident. During the previous 24 hours, more than 70 Hezbollah infrastructures were struck using more than 85 munitions. In the area of Tyre, about 10 command centers, weapons depots, and additional infrastructures were struck. In other words, the IDF is now operating only near the border and trying to dismantle entire layers of operational capability. This is from the forward positions to the organization's center. deep inside Lebanon. But Hezbollah still has one tool that is deeply concerning: fiber optic drones. These are FPV drones connected to the operator through a thin fiber cable and not through regular radar transmissions. The operational meaning is clear. Electronic warfare is not enough. There is no simple frequency jamming. The drone can transmit high-quality video almost without delay. It can strike a hidden target or a target inside a building. And that's why the defense establishment is changing its direction. It's not only blocking the frequencies, it is moving to optical and acoustic detection. Yes, it is deploying systems that identify the movement, shape, and sound. It is adding smoke screening during the movement of forces, tanks, and armored personal carriers. It is searching for the operator, not only the drone, and closing the fire loop on him from the air or from the ground. There are also simpler solutions, and maybe that is exactly why they matter. Nets installed on vehicles and structures in order to disrupt the warhead. Shotguns that create a cloud of pellets and can break a propeller or cut the fiber. Smart sights with artificial intelligence with the help of a soldier shoot. The soldier can shoot down a drone with the light weapons, with these scopes. And in some forces, they are already talking about a dedicated role, a team, a drone defender, a soldier whose job is to look upward while the team moves forward. And at the same time, the Ministry of Defense is also advancing high-power microwave systems, laser interception, and interceptor drones that are capable of locking optically onto an enemy drone and deploying a physical net. So this is a return to the simple physics. See, disrupt, shoot down. Not every solution has to be expensive. Sometimes, on the battlefield, the right solution is the one that arrives on time, works quickly, and does not wait for the perfect laboratory. Inside Hezbollah, the picture works harder than the organization is trying to present. Testimonies from the field describe operatives hiding in wooded areas and along roadsides with almost no communication, limited supplies, and constant pressure not to be exposed. Some of them describe fear of leaving the field, because anyone who tries to escape may be seen as a traitor. This is an organization that talks about victory, but some of its people they're living like hunted men. And still, its leadership is not backing down. Naim Qassem, head of Hezbollah, Hezbollah's Secretary General, so he delivered an especially aggressive speech, and he threatened that the government of Lebanon will be in the crosshairs, not just Israel. He claimed that the authorities in Lebanon do not have the right to act as they wish in this situation, and threatened that the people could take to the streets to bring down the government itself. He rejected every demand to disarm Hezbollah and claimed that handing over the weapons means destruction. In other words, Hezbollah is telling the Lebanese state, either you accept us armed, or we will dismantle you from within. And this is the key point, because if the agreement with Iran deals only with Hormuz and uranium, but leaves Hezbollah with money, weapons, and freedom of action, Israel will face a much bigger problem in a few months. Iran is not only a nuclear program, it is also a network of proxies, drones, smuggled missiles, command centers, and militias that receive oxygen every time Tehran receives relief. That's why the Abraham Accords are now entering the picture. Trump is trying to build a wider regional deal, to open up Hormuz, to claim that the energy markets are theirs, to stop the war, and at the same time to push Arab and Muslim countries to join a diplomatic framework with Israel. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Pakistan, and other countries are being mentioned as part of this effort. And the idea is clear. If the region wants to enjoy the calm, it needs to participate in a new order. But there is a danger here. A big victory picture can hide weak clauses. Ceremonies, flags, signatures, and declarations do not replace supervision over uranium. They do not dismantle the missiles. They do not close the tap to Hezbollah. They do not guarantee that the militias will not return to rearm the day after. In Europe as well, we see how the arena is expanding. In Spain, police raided the headquarters of the ruling party as part of an investigation into suspicious of illegal funding, while in the background, there are also serious Israeli complaints regarding ties with Iran and components that, according to the allegations, reached Israel's enemies. In London, massive fire broke out at a supermarket in Golders Green, a Jewish neighborhood, with about 100 firefighters and 15 fire engines at this scene. There's still no official determination that this was a hate crime, but the incident is being examined against the background of an anti-Semitic wave that is being felt strongly in Jewish communities around the world. All of this brings us back to Hormuz, because this war is no longer only between the IDF and Hezbollah or between the United States and the Revolutionary Guards. This is a war over the question of who sets the rules of this game. In the Middle East, states that are trying to stabilize the region, or regimes and terrorist organizations that hold the world through straits, borders, drones, and threats. The Americans are trying to open the strait without blowing up the negotiations. Israel is trying to dismantle Hezbollah without allowing Iran to buy time. Iran is trying to look as if it is negotiating in good faith, while the Revolutionary Guards continue testing the boundary on the ground. And this is exactly the point where the story becomes dangerous. If Hormuz truly opens, but Iran remains with a nuclear program, money, and proxies, that's not victory. It is a pause before the next round. And if the agreement forces Iran to retreat at sea on the nuclear issue or in Lebanon, then this may be the moment when the Middle East begins to move in a different direction. So keep spreading the truth, follow us, and most importantly, hit the subscribe button so that you never miss another update of Boots on the Ground. You can keep looking for us on social media, Yair Pinto, Mati Shoshani, to see the life in Israel behind the scenes, through our eyes. And the best thing that you can do is unite in prayer for this situation. I would say start with the people of Iran. They need our prayers more than anybody else. And you can pray for our leaders that are involved in these negotiations. And you can pray for the children that are affected by all these wars. You can pray for God's will to be done here in this region. You can pray for the peace of Jerusalem. God is acting. He's performing biblical level miracles, and he wants to hear from you. So keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.